Every OSR game suffers from the same fundamental problem. Not just OSR games, but any RPG that prides itself on being brutally deadly. They all have to deal with the same thing. Actually, how did Uncle Matt put it?
Characters die all the time in Crows, all the time. Life is cheap in Crows because the world is terrifying and deadly and chaotic.
That's right. Play our game and you're gonna die! Some games even phrase this same threat in different words. Your character doesn't matter. And they say it with pride, with their whole chest, like it's the best thing in the world. And I don't get why. Is that appealing? Is that why you play role-playing games? Or do we play games for different reasons? The I'm the hero game and the I'm some idiot game. Well, yes, but there's a way to enjoy both, and I know I do. I love all kinds of games. I do mostly play 5th edition D&D, but that's because I play long campaigns, while OSR games are played on a much shorter time scale. Wait, that's it. The reason OSR games are so deadly is because they're working on a much shorter time scale. I mean, it's perfectly fine to die horribly if you're only playing one night a month or 6 times a year if you're lucky. Yeah, that had better be a memorable game night. So how do you make a game that's deadly, but also works in long-term play? A game that can find people like you and me, people who mostly play 5th edition, and introduce them to a whole new style of play. Not just a new system, but a new reason to play. I think we're about to watch MCDM do just that with their new game, Crows. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where I maintain a flirtatious tryst with old-school ideas despite being a filthy 5e DM. My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for a bit over a decade. And it's my absolute pleasure to tell you that this whole video is sponsored by MCDM for their new crowdfunder, Crows. There's a link in the description. But the truth is, sponsored or not, I would have made this video talking about Crows anyway. Just don't tell MCDM that. And in case you aren't familiar with MCDM, let me play Matchmaker. Matt Colville's seminal work, the video series running the game, afforded him the community goodwill to launch an RPG publishing company called MCDM. Early on, he created a 5e magazine called Arcadia, where he partnered with one James Introcaso, who had worked with D&D on these books. James Introcaso spent the next few years being the grommet to Matt Colville's Wallace, and during that time, MCDM made these books. And with them done, it's time for James to make his own game, and that game is Crows. And while Crows doesn't call itself OSR, it has a lot in common with those kinds of games, even citing them at the front of their book. So James has gone and made one of those "you're all gonna die" games. But it isn't OSR? I mean, what is OSR anyway? If you ask 30 old grognards what OSR means, you're going to get 40 definitions. So let me add a 41st definition for you to confuse things even further. When old players find themselves nostalgically yearning for a return to older editions, they pick up their old books and realize how far we've come in terms of layout and art and design. The medium has evolved in the intervening years. Like watching an old movie. It may be a classic, but it feels old. That doesn't mean it's not brilliant art. It's just a little dated. We call these old players grognards. It is a reference to Napoleon's soldiers or something. Go watch Sibaju explain it in his video. So the grognards go looking for or making their new game with old-timey sensibilities, and that is the old school Renaissance, or OSR, or revival, or resurrection, whatever you want to call it. This vast collection of systems beyond number, and they broadly agree on certain design principles, such as wanting to get the feeling of the old books, but with more modern design sensibilities. And yes, some of you grognards watching this are so hard-coded grognarded that you'll leave a comment saying, "I never needed the OSR. I never left the best edition." And then you'll tell me what edition that is, but it'll be a different edition from the guy who commented that exact comment 3 hours earlier. You tell him, whippersnappers. I'll end up joining you in grognardom when 5th edition is the old game. OSR games tend to have a lot of commonalities. For instance, their stat blocks tend to be teeny tiny, like this big. They tend to be simple, slim, lightweight, and really, really deadly. But they're also nostalgic, or even often explicitly conservative. They're about preserving that old style of play from whichever system those players played when they were young. I made a whole video going into all the OSR systems I have on my bookshelf, but if I had to summarize, then I'd say that there are 2 phrases that I think describe the OSR really, really well. The first is, if you can run Keep on the Borderlands glance with minimal effort, then it is compatible enough to be considered OSR. And for crows, that one's a stretch. I mean, it's possible, but crows doesn't have goblins or orcs and ogres. The second phrase is the OSR is where you solve problems with your brain, not your character sheet. And let me tell you, that is true about crows. There's barely any problems that your character sheet solves. You need your wits and luck to survive a dungeon. So, is crows OSR? The lead designer says no quite eloquently in this video. But I think it's fair to say that it's OSR's younger cousin who's like really into punk. But if so much of the game's drama is inherent to whether or not your precious main character will survive the dungeon, how can you get invested if they die? If your characters keep dying, why are you invested in the game? I think there is this huge gulf in the hobby between two types of gamers. To put it pejoratively, on one hand, the people who watch Critical Role, and on the other hand, the people who think this glow-in-the-dark book is peak RPG design. The people who commission arts of their OC expecting DMs to incorporate their backstories into the campaign, get into romance, and empathize with the villain of all people. And the people who think levels 1 to 3 is the backstory, the dungeon is what we're here to do, and the people who want to cut the shoe leather, skip the yapping, and they call the improv cringe. And everyone is somewhere on this spectrum. Some people play both sides, but I assume most prefer one or the other, or at least have a preference leaning one way or the other. And because these ideas need names, we should imagine people complexly. I will call them the dramatic heroes and the dungeon crawlers. And they argue. They don't understand each other, but that's because they play different games. And notice I said games, I don't mean different systems, I mean different games. Side 1 will post a question on a forum on the internet someplace, and inevitably, moments later, they'll get shouted at by Side 2 because Side 2 thinks the question itself is preposterous, because in the game Side 2 plays, that question is preposterous. I see it happen all the time. I got a lot of angry comments on this video about backstories from the dungeon crawler gamers because in the meat grinder game, the idea of making a special backstory with plot hooks is frankly absurd. Likewise, I've gotten a lot of angry comments at any of my dungeon videos because dungeons are inherently kind of boring in the dramatic heroes game. I'd go so far as to say that I think every argument unique to the RPG space can usually be traced to some version of this ongoing debate. Sometimes I've seen it called the simulationist versus roleplay debate, but I think that's reductive. Then again, I'm probably being reductive when I say it's the dungeon crawlers versus dramatic heroes debate. I mean, I enjoy both at my table. See, I love all kinds of games, usually for short flings while in a cabin, on vacation, or over the course of a spectacular weekend with my friends. I love visiting those systems, but I'm only married to one game. I play long campaigns in 5th edition D&D, and as of the release of this video, my main campaign I started 2 years ago just reached session 149 and the players are 6th level. We play long campaigns, long enough to develop whole cities, continents, and whatever else in full detail like I did with my broadsheets. They are basically soap operas with dragons and wizards. So whenever I hear about the newest meat grinder dungeon crawler, I know that I won't marry that game. I'll try it. I may even love it, but it's not wife material for me because if someone dies every 3rd session, we'd be rolling up character number 50 for session 150, and I cannot deal with that. There is no reason for me to get invested because any longevity dies with my character. So that dissonance between the meat grinder and the desire to have longevity and investment is a problem. MCDM clearly acknowledges this difference because they made 2 games. Draw Steel is the event-based dramatic heroism game, i.e. Dragons. And Crows is the location-based dungeon crawler game, i.e. Dungeons. They even said as much in their newest video.
D&D Heroes. So we'd have a high-octane, high-fantasy, heroic tactical game, the kind of game modern nerds imagine when they imagine epic fantasy battles. Then I would build a second game, a deadly, gritty, low-fantasy survival horror dungeon crawler, designed from the ground up to be about the dungeon versus your wits. And I would probably call it D&D Dungeons.
Okay, Matt, if you're doing D&D Dungeons, surely you call the other one D&D Dragons, right? Regardless, if I'm someone who prefers to avoid the meat grinder for my own long-term investment, then surely I shouldn't be excited about Crows. I should be excited about the Dramatic Heroes game. But that misunderstands the point because I think Crows manages to bridge the gap. You can see how for yourself. The crowdfunder page has the full rules for their open beta. So if you're skeptical, you can just read the rules for free. See, each OSR style RPG solves that problem in their own unique way. And it's telling about how those games want you to play them. Their solution informs their intent. Morkborg, for instance, plays it for laughs. It's an absurdist comedy game where you die hilariously and repeatedly. Not intended for long-form play. It's a comedy game, like Paranoia. Mausritter includes special new items with every trifold. So to me, when I open the box, it feels like it's 12 trifolds in the box is the game. And that's okay. I love that about it. I love that I know it is 12 sessions or 12 dungeons. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but it's certainly not going to last me 150 sessions. But I think Crows is going to tread the line here with a brilliant new mechanic. And it's not a complicated one, but it is genius. They do the typical gold is XP. You take XP back to town and you get to level up your character if they survive. But then, and this is the brilliant bit, you get to level up the town. So if you died horribly in the dungeon, there is still longevity and connective tissue because your next character is from the town we just leveled up, and the town got better following your unceremonious death in the dungeon. So your new character is explicitly and mechanically connected to your last one, and is explicitly better off because of the sacrifices made by your last hero in the dungeon. The party plays a group of heroes all from the same town, and you all level up that town. It becomes the long-term investment, and I think that's brilliant. I was invited to play Crows last Monday in a game run by James Introcaso, the lead designer, and I died horribly. And the thing is, I would love to play again because even though I died horribly, my party lived, and so did my pet goat. And I think that was my fairest death I've ever had in an RPG. We found this room full of treasure, and one of the other players, John Champion, said, "I'm not going in there, somebody else can do it." And I said, "Alright, if you're chicken shit, I'll go in and I'll go grab all the loot." I go grab one of the books, and the room starts filling with acid. So I run into the room further, up the spiral staircase, because the door just got locked behind me. I run up the spiral staircase as the room is filling with acid, and I quickly have a flip through, what kind of book did I get? And the DM says, it's an empty journal. So I run up to the steel hatch in the floor as the room's filling with acid, and I realize there really isn't much I can do about this. I pull out my knife, my only weapon in the game, put it into the lock, and then I use the journal to jam through the bottom of the knife to break the lock open. I make a strength roll, succeed, and the hatch flies open as I peek into the room above, where another PC had procced the room, and it was now full of monsters, including the boss monster we had just rolled as a random encounter, comes trundling into the room, and I think, oh my god, I can push the boss into the room filling with acid. I run away from the boss back towards the hatch. I use the taunt maneuver to make sure the boss attacks me, and then I take the readied action to push him into the hatch, into the bottom of the floor so he can melt in the acid that would have killed me. Then I fail my roll and the boss punches me to a pulp, and I died. And I loved it. If you're familiar with lots of RPGs, let me tell you what Crows is by using only references. Crows uses Drawsteel's core resolution mechanic inside Shadowdark's dungeons. It sprinkles on top Morkborg deadliness and Mausritter's inventory system, and you play classless characters from the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, capped off with a cherry on top. You're all upgrading your town as home base together. And if that sounded like a load of nonsense, let me break it down. Drawsteel's resolution mechanic means that every time you want to do something, you roll 2d10 and add your stat, which in Crows is like a +1 or a +2. Then you reference it on a chart, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. So a tier 1 result is an 11 or lower, a tier 2 is 12 to 16, and tier 3 is 17 or higher. And it's basically fail, succeed with consequences, or total success, 1, 2, 3, right? Shadowdark's dungeons, in this case, means we track the dungeon in real time. In the case of Crows, each dungeon turn is 30 minutes of real time, and at the end of that timer, we roll dice. In particular, we roll for random encounters and something called usage dice. Basically, a usage die is you roll to see if the thing you're using burns out or not. You know, in Shadow Dark, a torch always lasts the same amount of time, but in Crows, you roll for it. So you never know if this turn is the turn that your torch goes out in the dark, leaving you fighting all the horrible monsters that live in the dungeon in the dark. And of course, they live in the dungeon, so they can see in the dark, and you can't. You're a person. Morkborg deadliness means it only takes a couple of hits to kill your player character, so in any given situation, the best move is to not fight if you can avoid it. My girlfriend AB had a great time in the session we played because she just ran into rooms, stole the treasure, and ran away. I died because I tried to win fights, like a moron. Mausritter's inventory is special because it uses inventory slots, but specifically it's paired with physical inventory cards. When you find loot in Mausritter, you get a little card, and the same is true in Crows. Lots of these dungeon crawl style games use inventory slots, but I often hate those mechanics unless they're paired with physical cards and sheets to manage it. In Fantasy Flight Star Wars, characters don't have classes. They are built out of skill trees. Crows does the same. At character creation, you get a background, and if you survive the dungeon, you get XP. And then you'll be able to invest in a skill tree that looks a bit like this one. You build your character through skill trees as you play, maybe changing your main tree halfway through the game because you found good loot that you wanted to use. Almost all of these abilities involve making your gear be even better, because Crows is about the stuff you have, not the superpowers you get when you level up. Town as home base. Like, you know, if you come back to town, you could spend 3,000 gold on setting up a bookseller, and you could then buy and sell spell books instead of only being able to find them in dungeons. Or maybe you spent 3,000 golds to found a blacksmith, and now you can actually repair your armor. Because the way armor works in Crows is that when you take damage, your armor takes the damage instead and eventually is destroyed. So you want to repair your armor. If you want to see what else your town you could do, go check out the beta rules on the crowdfunder page. Again, link below. Because there are so few mechanics built into like your class or who you are, it all comes down to what equipment you have on your character sheet and whether or not you can think of useful uses for it. Earlier when I broke through the hatch, the blank journal was useful as a way to leverage the knife through the lock. I had an 11-foot pole, 1 foot better than a 10-foot pole. It goes up to 11. And when we were trying to cross a bloodied lake, literally a lake of blood, we couldn't figure out how deep it was because blood is opaque. So I dip my pole in and then pull it out like I'm measuring the oil in a car, and I see how deep is it. We learn it's about 3 feet, and I figure we can wade that, so we go cross it. Ball bearings, caltrops, and a smoke bomb that AB's character, the thief, brought along turned out to be clutch. We would have died, all of us, without them. The smoke bomb made it so that the monsters really couldn't hit us that much, which was fantastic. If you get a chance to play Crows, grab the smoke bomb. At one point, all the monsters jumped onto these bookshelves that were towering above us, and I realized there are so many monsters, we don't have the actions for this. So I grabbed my 11-foot pole, I push it up against one of the bookshelves, and use it to lever the whole bookshelf down so it falls on all the other bookshelves like dominoes. James figures, sure, why not? He rolls 4d10 for damage, and we kill all the monsters in the room. I couldn't have done that with my knife, but I did it with my wits. That's the kind of game Crows is. It's all about using your brain to solve the dungeon, because your character sheet won't do it, and occasionally your equipment sheet will help, but the main thing you have is your brain. And by the way, I keep saying the monsters, that's because they don't have names. The coolest thing Crows does is it doesn't name the monsters in the monster manual. It just has a picture and a stat block. Nobody's ever seen it before you tell me what it's called. We call these things the blood imps, because they look like imps and they were like blood creatures. Why not? We had a great time naming all the monsters we found in the dungeon as they pummeled us to death. The creature that killed me we called the meat tenderizer, because my name was Meat. I'm so excited about this game, folks. I expect I'll run it in my own setting eventually, probably deep in Orithon's prehistory, when the known world ended before human civilization was ever built. I think that'd be rad. And in case I hadn't already explained why MCDM will forever have my love, even if it hadn't already, I made this video about Draw Steel, explaining what I thought were their brilliant negotiation mechanics and how people can use them at their table, no matter what system they're running. At the end of that video, I concluded that systematized role-playing isn't for me, and Draw Steel probably wasn't either. and I thought I had pissed MCDM off. A designer even reached out, and clearly, by the way they were talking to me, felt a little rug pulled by it. So, sorry. But ultimately, Drawsteel wasn't for me. But I think Crows is. I'm really excited to get my books because I already backed the project. And despite me making a video criticizing Drawsteel, MCDM wanted to sponsor this video because they like their customers, they care about them, and want to foster an active, honest, and diverse community. And I love that. One last story from Monday's session. I started the game with a pet goat because one of the starting equipment you can get is a goat, and there's like pet tree, and you can start with, goats and mules, pack animals. You could put inventory on them. Brilliant. I figure I name my goat Matt since out of all the dungeon tubers, Matt is the goat, greatest of all time. And as a part of having a goat, it meant I could sacrifice my maneuver to make the goat act. Every turn you get an action and a maneuver. An action is an action. A maneuver is basically your movement, but you can also do other stuff with it, like swapping things on your belt and stuff like that. So occasionally, I'd just stand still and order my goat around, and it would headbutt the enemies, and it would save our bacon. If I'd survived, I would have invested in the goat tree, but here we are. When I was killed, my goat charged into the room to attack the boss. At first, he stood in the doorway bleating, trying to get the boss to attack it, because I was trying to cover the party's escape. The boss didn't go for it, so I sent the goat running into the room along the walls, because they had inclines on them. It's a mountain goat. Runs along the walls, lands next to the boss, headbutts it a couple of times, and then runs out of there and joins the rest of the party. It lived. When I make a new character to play this campaign some more, it's going to be a new character from the starting town with the same party, with the same goat. I have inherent long-term investment. I think this is brilliant. This absolutely solves my issues with OSR and dungeon crawly type games. What I saw when I looked through the beta test rules of Crows is a game that wants to bridge the gap between the actual OSR, like Mausritter, and the 5e players who are looking for longer form games where they can get invested long term. But it's also slightly rules heavier than most OSR games because the OSR assumes you know how to run dungeons by now, that you're already an experienced dungeon master, because it's a nostalgic game. Crows, meanwhile, wants to help you, wants to provide you with enough tools to torture your players in the fairest way possible. And when I say rules heavier, it's still about the size of an OSE box, and that's like 5 booklets, and the books are like 60 pages. It's not like we're talking about a phone book like Drawsteel. Honestly, as someone who's worked on all kinds of projects, I find it really easy to see the fact that James Introcaso and MCDM are coming to this game because they feel like they wanted to do something different. They wanted to change everything, to get a fresh start. Crows is what happens after a game designer spends 2 years working on a heroic game and has had it with the players' bullshit. In Crows, we the players, we weren't heroes. We were just some morons trying our goddamn best. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend. And look at it, I made this! You can get my setting and a fantastic level 1 adventure right now in print. Come by the Mystic Art store and buy the broadsheet in print. It's available now. And the physical copy of issue 2 is available for pre-order as well if you want to bundle them together. So until next time, keep studying the Mystic Arts.